All right, guys, let's kick things off. It's 6:01 local time here in downtown Ubud, Bali. Tuesday, April 7th, 2015. It's time for Bitcoin Filter. We do this every week. Same time, same place here at the beautiful Ubud co-working space right across the street from the Monkey Forest. We do this live and in person. We also stream live on YouTube and Google+. So welcome to all you guys who are checking in online. And if you do find yourself in Bali and Ubud on a Tuesday night, I hope you'll come join us in person. We do this every week at 6 p.m. local, rain or shine. So let's kick things off here. We've got a really good show for you tonight. We're going to talk about China. We talked about China recently. I think last week we talked all about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. There's a lot of things going on with the global monetary policy. The global financial system is waking up. This is one of the things that makes Bitcoin so interesting to follow. We're going to revisit China. We're also going to revisit Greece. Have you guys been following what's going on in Greece? No? Okay. Well, we had a whole meeting on Greece a couple meetings ago. This is also having a big effect on the euro and the currency they use there. All kinds of strange things happening on the global stage. So we're going to revisit Greece and China. We're going to talk with the president of Harvard, Larry Summers. He has hey John, welcome.
Hey, Dan.
Good. We're gonna talk with him. He did an op-ed on the Asia Infrastructure Investment Banks. We're gonna see what he thinks about that. There's also been a shakeup at the Bitcoin Foundation. Basically, this is an organization that asserted itself as the kind of the spokes entity for Bitcoin, and now there's all kinds of scandal. It's very salacious. So we're gonna see what's going on there, try and make heads or tails of all the spats going back and forth, the email flame wars. We're also going to check in on the trial of the DEA agents that were busted for extorting Bitcoin from the organizers of Silk Road and offering to sell information about the Silk Road investigation to the quote Dread Private Roberts, who started the Silk Road online marketplace for drugs. And last but not least, the name of tonight's session is, do you work for money? And presumably the answer is yes. And well, we're just going to take a look at the money that you earn and keep and save and spend, and how does it work? And why is Bitcoin an alternative to the money that we already use every day? I took a trip recently to Komodo and had some very philosophical discussions about the nature of money. It started because they only accept dollars as payment, and we had a long talk about why they do that. So
They don't accept rupiah?
they accept rupiah, but only after their pricing is in dollars. So whatever the going rate is, the price of the excursion is in dollars, and if you need to, you can convert to rupiah, but it's
It's like a specific company.
Right. So we're going to talk about that. So with that, let's kick things off. I'm going to share my screen so people are no longer looking at me. They're going to look at my desktop. So just bear with me for a second. Thanks for coming. Welcome. You're not too late. Yes. I'm just now sharing my screen with everybody at home. So good timing. All right. So this is Bitcoin filter number 39. We've done this 38 times before, so we're still going strong. The way this thing works is, well, I'll post all of the links that I'm going to talk about today in this meeting event. So you'll see after the show, I'll post all the links in here. If you want to, if we talk about anything that you're interested in, you can find it here. And then after you leave, we have an ongoing conversation on Facebook. In this group, the Bitcoins in Bali Facebook group. If you find something interesting about Bitcoins or about Bali or about Bitcoins and Bali, then that'd be a good thing to post, and we can discuss it online, and then when we get together in person, we can argue about it. So it's always polite though, never like too mean. The other thing we do is we talk about things on Twitter. We use this Bitcoins in Bali hashtag. So you can check there for, I post things about Bitcoins there, and if it's relevant to what we're going to talk about, I'll tag it with that. But there's a lot of interesting info on Twitter. And you can always watch these recordings after the fact. You can go and we have a YouTube channel. I'll post a link to the show after the fact, and you can go check it out later, or share it with your friends, or not watch it at all. It's your choice. All right. So what are we up to here in Bali with Bitcoin? We're like this is like a social experiment we got going on here, where we're trying to create a Bitcoin economy. Of course, this is going on all over the world. What you're looking at here is coinmap.org, and these are all the places, and these are the number of establishments that accept Bitcoin around the world. You can see it's taking off in Europe, and over here in North America, there's hundreds of places that accept Bitcoin. But well, if we scroll over here, we go down into Bali. It's well, got a little work to do. There's about 35 brick and mortar establishments that are accepting Bitcoin now, but we're in the process of trying to make it happen here. So anyway, we go and try and frequent the places that take Bitcoin. We meet with merchants and show them how to accept it. We have a Bitcoin 101 class that we have here at Ubud once a month, where we teach people how to use it. We get them a wallet, and we give them a little bit of Bitcoin to play with, send it back and forth, get your, roll up your sleeves kind of stuff. But anyway, that's what we're doing here in Bali. So thanks for coming tonight, guys, and get involved. All right, so each and every week we talk about the price. What is the price of Bitcoin? And right now, Bitcoins are going for $254 for one Bitcoin. So that's pretty good. You can see over the course of the last 24 hours, it's a little bit down. But 250 bucks, when I first started taking a look at Bitcoin, it was $5, $8. And I'm still kicking myself for not buying when it was that low, but we've come a long way since then. For those of you who haven't followed along, it went all the way up to $1,200 at one point in time. So last year, Bitcoin was the worst investment of 2014. It lost 70% of its value. But there's lots of reasons for that. I'm undaunted. I think it's going to be fine. But anyway, that's where we are now. Of course, we're in Indonesia. So let's take a look at the Indonesian price. This is bitcoin.co.id, the largest Bitcoin exchange in Indonesia. One Bitcoin is worth 3.2 million Indonesian rupiah. So if you have one Bitcoin, you're a millionaire in Indonesia. So yeah, that's the price of Bitcoin. But let's take a look. Bitcoin is different from other currencies because we always know the supply of Bitcoin. Whenever you're trying to figure out the price of something, economists talk about supply and demand. But every other money on earth, rupiah, dollars, we don't know what the supply is. But with Bitcoin, we can always ask, what's the total number of Bitcoin in existence? And this is a real-time update. There's a little over 14 million Bitcoins. We reached over 14 million. So just over, that's a good number. I think that's an up-to-date figure. 14 million Bitcoins in existence today, right? 14 million point 0.0000. There's 8 zeros there. Anybody have any idea why there's 8 zeros behind the yeah? Anybody?
Yeah, it'll be inching over to the right. That has mine more Bitcoin.
Right. So the way Bitcoin works is there are tens of thousands of computers all over the world. They're all kind of crunching away, and every once in a while, every 10 minutes, in fact, 25 new baby Bitcoins come into existence. And that's based on the code, the math behind Bitcoin. And every 4 years, the number of Bitcoins that are born every 10 minutes is cut in half. So sometime next year, instead of 25 Bitcoins being born every 10 minutes, 12 and a half Bitcoins will be born every 10 minutes. And when there's a half a Bitcoin born, we'll be starting to create Bitcoins to the right of the decimal place here, right? And we won't get out here until, well, more than 100 years in the future. The last Bitcoin, according to the code, will be created in the year 2140. So, yeah, your Bitcoins will belong to your grandchildren at that point.
I'll be here.
Yeah, that's good. Me too, JP. I'll see you there. Okay, so so the other cool thing that you can do, because you know the number of Bitcoins in existence, and you know the price of Bitcoins, you can figure out the total market cap. Oops. That's the total number of Bitcoins in existence times the price is 255, was it? Thereabouts. So all Bitcoins on planet Earth are worth about $3.5 billion, right? So it might sound like a lot, but $3.5 billion, I think that's like the tip jar at Goldman Sachs, you know? That's how much they set aside to pay fines for a month. So it's still early days. We still have a long way to go. But because Bitcoin is mathematically limited in number, if it does become more popular, then the value will rise because there's a limited supply. If there's more demand, then they'll drive the price higher. All right, so moving on. Okay, 2 weeks ago we talked about Greece, so I wanted to give a little update. When I was putting this together, I accidentally did an image search instead of a data search for this Greece key dates for repayment. And I wanted to share this with you guys because I thought it was kind of funny. Like, these guys are mostly not happy faces. Like, just look, this is the finance minister of Greece. This is the new president of Greece. All these pictures, like, he's kind of smiling, but it's kind of a PR smile. All these guys are. What? Yes. He's like, oh, I don't want to answer that question. This is Christine Lagarde. She's the head of the IMF. The Greeks owe her a lot of money. If you scroll down, you can see all kinds of angry people grimacing. Except for her. He's making a claw. There was actually a kind of a controversy because this Varoufakis guy was talking, and he said he wanted to give Germany the finger, and there's pictures of him holding up his middle finger. I'd hate to be in the public eye because people are snapping photos of you all the time, and they get to choose what they put in the paper. And I touch my nose a lot. You know, if it was the wrong angle, it could look like I was picking my nose. Like, you never know. Anyway, I don't think I have to worry about that. Okay, so let's take a look at the actual info. Basically, Greece is a bit of a public relations war, right? They're trying to make sure that everybody knows that they're going to be able to pay off their debts, right? The IMF and the Eurozone, the European Central Bank, they've loaned these guys a lot of money, and because there is a perception that Greece might default, people are pulling their money out of Greek banks, right? In fact, there's rumors that they might start capital controls, right? Meaning, like, you can only get so much money out of the ATM, or you can only transfer so much money out of Greece. There's even people in Germany that are turning in all of their euros that were minted in Greece, because if you ever travel in Europe, you pick up a euro, you can see where it's from. And supposedly they're all fungible, meaning you can trade a euro in Greece for a euro in Germany, but they're kind of butting heads now, and there's a bit of a question on whether a euro is a euro is a euro. But the public statements are Greece, quote, intends to meet all obligations to all creditors ad infinitum. So they get in the press, they try and kind of like beat their chest, and they're trying to get people to believe, right? Because money is not a real thing; it's a fictional thing, and if people believe that Greek money is not worth anything, or people believe that they need to go get some German euros and get out of Greek banks, then they'll do it. And the only thing stopping them is belief. So he's trying to manage public opinion, right? Now, I put this story up here because, you know, there's no way, you know, for Bitcoin, there's no way to install capital controls. You can't keep people from, you can't control people's money when they control the private keys for their Bitcoin. So there's no such thing as capital controls when it comes to Bitcoin. And when other kinds of money has the problems that I'm highlighting here, it generates interest in Bitcoin. There was a time back in 2013 when Cyprus was experiencing the same sort of difficulties. And it was when we saw the second price spike in Bitcoin, because there was all this talk of capital controls in Cyprus. And so people, at least in part, moved their money into Bitcoin, and there was a price spike. So it's altogether possible that if things get worse in Greece, it could have an effect on the price of Bitcoin. Here's a little schedule of what Bitcoin, or what Greece owes to whom and when. This is 2015, so that you can see they owe approaching $30 billion. So all the Bitcoins in the world couldn't save Greece at this point. It's kind of interesting to see how this breaks down. This blue is the European Central Bank. This red is the IMF. And this gray part is Treasury bills. So I don't know if I come from the United States, and you know, my grandmother would give me like a savings bond, like, you know, for my birthday, like a $25 savings bond, and I was like, oh, cool, this is $25, when really it was only $25 like 10 years in the you know, 10 years from then. But you know, presumably this is supposed to be, you know, you're loaning the government money when you have a treasury bill, and on a certain date the government pays you back. Well, the date is here for Greece. You know, somebody's Greek grandmother gave them a Greek bond, you know, because they were going to go to college someday. And in 2015, Greece has got to pay back that money to somebody. You know, sometimes people, you know, we talk about the U.S. debt a lot, and the U.S. debt is over $18 trillion. And sometimes people say, well, it's okay. You know, we just owe it to ourselves. It's no big deal. But it is kind of a big deal, because there's real people that have loaned that money to these sovereign nations, and at a certain point they have to pay it back, or people suffer. So it's a big deal. All right, we also talked about China, so let's move into China. Last week we talked about the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank. Right, and this is China's answer to the International Monetary Fund and the World Bank, and essentially it's a repudiation of the dollar. The United States is responsible for the dollar. The dollar happens to be the world's reserve currency, and we have not been good stewards of the dollar since 2008, and this is China's answer to that. Essentially, they're saying, well, you know, if you're going to do that with the dollar, we're going to start our own international, the equivalent of an international monetary fund, and we'll fund projects in renminbi maybe, and give those contracts to Chinese contractors, and we'll never need to touch a dollar for all of that commerce. And anyway, it's bad news for the dollar. And we had this tweet from one of the government-sanctioned news outlets in China. Hashtag AIIB is an international relations milestone, rewriting mechanisms of the world order. So that's pretty bold statement, and it's kind of true. And it's yeah, you know, it's on the face of it, it just looks like, oh, they're going to go help, like, you know, little brown people build bridges somewhere in Indonesia maybe. And it's much more than that. And I think this statement acknowledges that it's way bigger than just going and building some bridges for Africa or undeveloped Asian countries. It's a world challenger to the World Bank, and it's a big deal. And it's created because the dollar is failing in its role as the world's reserve currency. Incidentally, how is it related to Bitcoin? Well, Bitcoin is also a repudiation of the dollar and an attempt to create something, basically create an alternative. So that's the update there. This is an op-ed in the New York Times about the Asian bank, and the New York Times is saying, oh, and it's no big deal. China's got all these problems themselves, and we're making a mountain out of a molehill. Let's see, in 2008, just as the United States financial system was crashing, China surpassed Japan as the biggest holder of US Treasury securities, setting off predictions that Beijing might one day dump them to force the United States into economic and political submission. So he's equating that to this creation of a new bank, and it didn't mean the demise back then, and probably doesn't mean the demise now, is his contention. But this guy's got a book to sell. He's got a book that's coming out called The China Boom, Why China Will Not Rule the World. So I don't know. I'm not sure he can be completely objective.
He has to say that.
In my opinion, he's wrong. But it's we entertain all opinions here at Bitcoin Filter. So anyway, take a look at that. You can judge for yourself. On the other side of the debate is this guy, Larry Summers. Have you guys ever heard of Larry Summers? He was big. He's the president of Harvard now. He's a big personality. If you watch any documentaries about the 2008 crisis, or he goes way back to the Clinton administration. Kind of a bully, kind of a hard guy. But he's writing he's wagging his finger at the administration, saying we missed the boat. We made tactical and strategic errors by allowing China to create this bank. Of course, if you were here last week, we talked all about how the U.S. was trying to get Britain to not join the bank, and then they joined the bank anyway. And it was, now we're trying to get Japan to not join, but it looks like they might join. And he's kind of wagging his finger and saying, oh, the U.S. has blown it, and the policies are bad, and it's all because of the left fighting the right, and the right fighting the left. Let's see. Oh, he's also warning about a deflationary spiral, right? So we may be headed into a world where capital is abundant. This bank is providing capital for investment, right? And deflationary pressures are substantial. Demand could be in short supply for some time. In no big industrialized countries do markets expect real interest rates to be much above zero before 2020. We'll talk about interest rates a little bit more. But what he's warning about is deflation. This is the boogeyman that all economists hold up as the demise of us all. But really, deflation really just means a contraction in the economy. And all natural systems expand and contract and breathe. And we've been kind of on a heroin binge since 2008, and the political powers are doing all that they can to make sure that things are growing. And well, sooner or later, nature asserts itself, and we probably will have a deflationary period, and it shouldn't be a bad thing. It's bad for governments because it ruins their ability to collect taxes, right? Because if you're getting more for the dollars that you already have, then you can't tax those dollars. So there's this ethos of grow, and basically that's the ethos of cancer. It's not a good ethos. It's not a natural state of affairs, and deflation will happen, and he's warning about it. But it's I would say it's not a bad thing. It should just be allowed to happen naturally. Okay, that's all I'll say about that. Read it for yourself, though. There's some good stuff there. Okay, moving on. Like I said, we talk about stories that people post in the Facebook group. This is one that was posted this week about the Bitcoin Foundation. The Bitcoin Foundation is a controversial outfit. They they threw the first Bitcoin conference, and they raised a bunch of money. People paid dues, and they began paying some of the core developers, right? And basically giving them a salary and paying them based on the dues that they collected from all over the world, all these people that wanted to be a part of the Bitcoin foundations. I'm a member of the Bitcoin Foundation, but it really is anathema to what Bitcoin is all about. It's a centralized body that will govern Bitcoin. And people from the very start had a problem with this. And they just recently had elections. And one of the guys that was elected has now resigned. And he's kind of like coming out to the world and kind of outing the real situation behind closed doors of the Bitcoin Foundation, saying that they're broke and that they're totally not transparent, and they wouldn't allow him to take notes or record the minutes for the meetings. The Bitcoin Foundation has almost no money left. They just fired 90% of the people they'd hired. So it's a soap opera moment. There's lots of them in Bitcoin. There's like lots of blocked site here in Indonesia. All right, moving on here. Let's see. Another posting that was put in a group is this U.S. presidential order allows the state to confiscate crypto holdings. This was a presidential order, right? Basically an executive order where the president just kind of says we can do that. This is kind of an op-ed piece on the actual ruling, and it was posted in the group, I think, by our friend Peter from South Africa. I went and looked up the actual executive order itself. It's written in a lot of legalese, but essentially what it says is that it can come and confiscate your Bitcoins without warning. Right? If it thinks that you're some sort of bad actor, then it reserves the right to come confiscate your funds, right? Without prior notice. And this is actually not possible if you handle your Bitcoins correctly. It's not possible for them to just come and confiscate your funds. But a lot of the organizations that have sprung up around Bitcoin banks and Bitcoin exchanges, especially in the States, you don't control your private keys for your Bitcoin. So they could call up Coinbase or Circle and say, hey, we want John's Bitcoin because we think he's a bad guy. His beard's too long. He looks dangerous. Then they can do that. But if you were to handle your Bitcoins in a different way, then, well, you could insulate yourself from that. And that's one of the reasons Bitcoin was invented, was to give individuals personal liberty over their own funds that they've earned. So one of the things, it's written in such a way that you think they're going after bad guys, but there's language in here that really says they can go after anybody. Like it seems like they can only go after people like outside the United States, like people who want to harm the United States, but the language says directed by persons located in whole or in substantial part outside the United States. So they got some wiggle room there. They can say, oh, well, you talked to somebody that was overseas, so now we're going to investigate you, right? Also here, and this is a legal document. It's written in legalese. I mean, it may seem like I'm splitting hairs, but these words are there very explicitly and for a reason. The other wiggle room word is outside the United States that are reasonably likely to result in material contributed to or significant threat to national security, right? So it's very ambiguous language that gives them a lot of leeway to go after just about anybody for really any cause. There are recently declassified documents that show that WikiLeaks, for example, is considered a terrorist organization, or at some point in time was considered a terrorist organization by the United States government. And when WikiLeaks drew the ire of the United States government, they were cut off from Visa, MasterCard, SWIFT network. PayPal even cut off WikiLeaks. And they survived, at least in part, because people could make Bitcoin donations to WikiLeaks. And those funds cannot be frozen or interfered with. If I want to send Bitcoin to WikiLeaks and I know their address, there's nothing anybody can do to stop that. It's part of the power of Bitcoin. It's part of what makes Bitcoin really cool. But in this executive order, if I was interested in free speech and I gave money to WikiLeaks and the United States government thinks WikiLeaks is a terrorist organization, all of a sudden they think I'm aiding and abetting terrorists, and they can, according to this executive order, go after me. So I think this is a bad thing. This is done unilaterally in the U.S. government. The U.S. government is supposed to have checks and balances, the legislative branch and the judiciary, but the executive branch has the ability to issue these executive orders, and there are no checks and balances for those. So it's just interesting development. One of the stories that was posted in the group. All right, moving on here. Interest in Bitcoin grows on Wall Street. This is another story posted on the group. I won't go into a lot of detail, but one of the points made in the article is the widening investment pool could also quell Bitcoin's notorious price volatility. Like I said, Bitcoin went up to $1,200, and now it's down at $255. And if you're trying to do business with Bitcoin, that's not a good thing. If you've got to pay your bills next month and you don't know if the price is going to vary by 50, 60, 70%, then well, it's just hard to plan, right? So Bitcoin is still a baby, and it's still experiencing these wild price fluctuations. But if you graph the volatility over time, it goes down, and the more people that use Bitcoin, presumably will make the price more stable. So it's just a matter of scale, and when there's more people using it, more transactions, there'll be more price stability, and that's one of the points being made here, although there's more there. And yeah, take a look. Last week we talked about these federal agents that were caught kind of, they were supposed to go undercover and investigate the Silk Road, in order to catch these guys. And now it was determined that they were interacting with the guy who organized the site and offering to sell him information about the investigation. And then they ended up confiscating Bitcoins as a matter of course of their investigations, and they siphoned those Bitcoins to their own accounts. And one of the pieces of evidence used in the trial was this map of Bitcoin addresses that linked. This is the Dread Pirate Robert. This is Ross Ulbricht. And these are a bunch of Bitcoin transactions. But what you can see here is defying best use practices in the Bitcoin world. This guy, Mark Force, I think is his name, basically diverted Bitcoins from all of these multiple sources within the Silk Road infrastructure to his own Bitcoin address, and then he transferred those funds to his own personal address. And this was basically used as evidence to link him to the Bitcoins that disappeared over the course of the investigation of Silk Road. So, a lot of people talk about Bitcoin and think that it's anonymous, but it's actually not anonymous. If they can associate one Bitcoin address with your physical body, then all bets are off. They can track all kinds of things, and that's what they did in this investigation. And this guy was a policeman. He should have known better. But it's kind of interesting that they were able to do all this investigation after the fact by looking at the Bitcoin blockchain. Okay, so moving along. The name of tonight's episode is, do you work for money? Right? And presumably the answer is yes. I just got back from Komodo National Park. I spent 5 or 6 days there. It's a really easy trip from Bali. You can fly for about an hour, land in Flores, right, and take a boat through all of these islands here. Right? It's fantastic. I highly recommend it. I shaved my head and got a nice sunburn. Went swimming with the manta rays. Check it out. This is a little bit of underwater video. That thing is about as big as a VW. It's like 2 or 3 meter wingspan, and yeah, it's pretty incredible sight. The splendor of nature can be found in Komodo National Park. So anyway, I invite you all to make a little excursion while you're here in Bali. It is amazing. The outfit that I did this with was called Dive Komodo. Right? They have these live aboard cruises where you go and live aboard a boat. You know, you sleep in a little cubby hole, and you wake up in the morning and the sun's coming up, and you just jump off into the water. It's amazing. I mean, and there's no people there. It's like one of the most remote places I've ever been. But why do I bring this up? Because this dive house has a policy of pricing their trips, their excursions in dollars. And I was just really curious about that. I was the only American on the trip, right? There were 8 divers, and then a bunch of crew and a dive master, all from countries that were not the United States. But all of their excursions are priced in dollars. And I found that really curious. And I was asking myself, why is that? And well, the reason really is that although I'm gonna trash the dollar over the next little while, you can see that this is the dollar versus the Indonesian rupiah for the last year, and it has lost about 20% of its value over the course of that time. And you know, this dive shop, they serve mostly Europeans, Americans. These are people that when the dollar is 20% more valuable, they've got 20% more value to spend. They can afford it. So you can see why they would charge 20% more, or why they would want to price things in dollars, because it insulates them from this kind of currency devaluation, right? So even though there's no Americans on the trip, they price things in dollars because really that's their best option for guarding against this. But it kind of screws people over, because you know, what if you're in Europe? You know, if the euro didn't gain that much over that time, or what if you're an Indonesian and you want to enjoy a national park in your own country, right? You're drawing the short end of the stick, man. Your vacation in your own country is 20% more expensive. So you know, because of these differences in currency values, people get screwed. I mean, there's just no 2 ways about it. If you earned a US dollar, then you're a winner. If you earned an Indonesian rupiah, sorry, Charlie, you know, you got to pay more. And it has nothing to do with you and your value as a human being. It just happens to be where you were. And who benefits from the difference in the rupiah from here to there? Well, it's not me or you. You know, it's somebody is messing with the exchange rate between those two currencies, and big deals are getting made, and lots of money is getting made, and most people are none the wiser, right? This dive company is doing all they can to make up for that change, but they don't have a lot of good options, right? So anyway, let's take a look at what happens with money. This is a single rupiah note from 1964. Now, if you visited Indonesia, you probably have not seen one of these things, right? We're talking about 1 rupiah. If you look in your wallet, you probably have 100,000 rupiah, right? What is 1 rupiah worth in dollars? Here's one IDR is worth 0.00007 US dollars. So 1/1000th of a penny is 1 rupiah. So you need another, I don't know, 9,000 and change rupiah of these notes to make up a penny. So basically this piece of paper is worthless. But somebody earned this note, like somebody picked some rice or took somebody on a taxi ride or did something, you know, they did something real in exchange for this symbol. And now the symbol is worthless. And, you know, if somebody's grandfather in 1964, you know, put this in an envelope for their grandchild and said, give this to them when they're, you know, 18 years old, well, that value has escaped into the ether, has gone somewhere else. And, you know, one of the reasons I'm so excited about Bitcoin is that kind of thing is not possible. You know, you earn a Bitcoin, the Bitcoin is yours forever. It doesn't get inflated away. And we're going to talk a little bit about inflation. Of course, that's Indonesia. You know, some people think, oh, it's third world. That's what happens in the third world. Like the US is different. Here's a dime from 1964, right? Dime, 10 cents. Well, 1964 was the last year that US dimes contained silver, right? If you were to find a 1964 dime today, it's got about $1.50 of silver inside of it, right? So just to draw the comparison, if somebody's grandfather earned this dime in 1964, and they put that dime in an envelope for their grandchild, at least he could melt down the silver, right? And have a dollar and change. Keep up with inflation a little bit. But if he had earned that dime in 1965, well, that dime would still be worth 10 cents because there's no intrinsic value in the 1965 dime. And it just goes to show that governments, even if, you know, it's an Indonesian government will devalue their currency, just like the US government will devalue their currency. And that's exactly what they've been doing. In the early 1960s, the silver supply for the nation's coinage was dwindling rapidly. As Congress and the administration debated over silver's future role in coinage, the silver market jumped 10% in response and another 30% by 1962. By 1964, they removed all the silver from coins, from US dimes, because they couldn't maintain the value. They were printing too much money, essentially. The silver in the dimes was meant to be a checks and balances, a check against the United States government's ability to do that. But instead of heeding that check, they just took the silver out of the money. Incidentally, if you ever pick up an Indonesian coin, it feels like a piece of tinfoil. Anyway, here's the calculator. One 1964 dime is worth $1.22. Here's a little inflation calculator. This is produced by the U.S. government, right? And so just to show you how the money that you earn, you know, we call this do you work for money? You earn a dollar in, let's say you earn $100 in 1980. You know, a lot of you were born, you know, in around this time, and you calculate. So $100 turns into $284 today, right? But you can flip that around and say if you had $284 in 1980, it's worth less than half today. So even though every year we've only got, you know, they say 2% inflation, 3% inflation. Oh, there was no inflation this year. It adds up. It adds up. And over the course of someone's lifetime, you can lose half your money. I mean, I think that's crazy. I mean, but we all kind of just, you know, shrug it off and say it's only 2%, not realizing that in a relatively short amount of time, you can lose a lot of value. This calculator goes all the way back to 1913, which is when they created the Internal Revenue Service, which is how the U.S. collects taxes. And when they created the Federal Reserve, which is the bank that creates our money, if you had $100 back 100 years ago, that'd be worth over $2,000 today. So, if you had that $100 bill, it was worth $2,000 100 years ago. If your grandfather earned it and wanted to give it to you, well, you can see a ton of that value has disappeared. I went through the exercise of, where is that? Let's see. The exercise of graphing 2% inflation. And it's really insidious. This is $100, right? And I did it at 2% every year. So this represents 100 years. And the curve of this graph is relatively flat. It looks quite tame, but you can see, I don't know if you can tell, but the curve of this, the slope of the curve is getting more and more steep, which means you're losing more and more money. And this graph shows that $100 after 100 years is worth $700, or has lost about 86% of its value, right? Here is the Federal Reserve's policy. This is the government policy, is to aim for 2% inflation, right? So basically, they want, if you live to be 100 years old, they want to take 85% of your money. I mean, it's just, I don't know why we just roll over for this, but we do. And I just, I thought some of these things might help illustrate what's really going on. This has been going on since time immemorial. This is Wikipedia on Roman currency. If I do a search for debasement, it's mentioned 12 times. It just happens over and over again. It talks about how they shave the edges off the coin. Coins have like the little ridges. You've seen, that was originally designed so that people wouldn't shave the edges off the coin. You could tell if the edge was shaved. That's why those little ridges are there. Of course, it doesn't matter when you have a U.S. quarter and it doesn't have any worth valuable metal in it anyway. It's like a remnant of when coins were made out of gold, etc. But you can, it's kind of interesting that, thousands of years ago they were doing this, and then we got evidence that they're doing it today. And why do I bring this up? Because Bitcoin is the answer to all that. I mean, it suggests that we can use money without it disappearing on us. That's the idea, right? Let's see what else we have here. Come on. Right here is a graph of the U.S. money supply. So over the course of my lifetime, they're making money, they're increasing the money supply, yada, yada, yada. And then here, this is 2008, the global financial crisis. Since 2008, the U.S. government has quadrupled the money supply. This is from the Federal Reserve. This is a graph provided by the U.S. government. This is what they're telling us is going on. And money, if you double the supply, then the money in your pocket is worth half as much, right? We have a problem here. The United States is ruining the dollar as a brand for money, right? People don't realize this yet. The dive shop in Komodo, they're like, yeah, dollars. We'll price in dollars. But China, the powers of the world, are creating their own development banks and arranging to settle their balance of accounts outside of the U.S. dollar. In closed meetings, they're angry. They're telling the United States, why are you devaluing your currency like this? It's just, you're not being a good shepherd of the value of the U.S. dollar, which facilitates commerce all over the world. The regular everyday Joe hasn't realized this yet. Let's see here. Here's the same graph, but the other thing that the U.S. government can do is control interest rates. And you can see that the other thing they did in 2008 is they lowered interest rates to 0, right? Which means that the money in your savings account is earning 0, or in some instances, if they charge you fees, it's actually negative interest. So you have your money in the bank. Basically, you're loaning your money to the bank, and they're charging you to loan them money. Why? Because the Federal Reserve, in order to stimulate the economy, in order to keep deflation from happening, remember we were talking about deflation, they're holding interest rates at 0. So they want somebody to borrow some money because they've got a great project, right? They've got a great thing they want to go build. They're presumably, if money is cheap, if it doesn't cost much to borrow some money, then you'll go cure cancer, or build a rocket ship that goes to the moon, or build an electric car. That's the idea. But the thing is, that has not been happening. People are not wanting to go into debt. With all of this money printing, that's the blue line, and these interest rates at 0, it has created this skewed view of the world, right? Remember we talked about money as a symbol. Real things are real, and money is a symbol. You can create as many symbols as you want, and that's what they're doing. The thing is, at some point, it's got to match reality. And if it doesn't match reality, then reality reasserts itself at some point. And as soon as people kind of wake up to this fact, things are going to change, and it's going to be bad for people who don't realize what's happening. So anyway, that's why I bring this up. Do you work for money? Yes, you do. You've probably got some dollars and some euros or some kind of money in your account. And if the world at large decides that that's not a good symbol for value, it wakes up and says, hey, you've been printing it for 5 or 6 years, and you've been loaning out that fictional money at basically 0. We don't really think those symbols are worth anything anymore. We think something else is that we should count another way. When that day happens, your mother, who's been saving all her life to retire and has $100,000 in the bank so she can live, her savings are wiped out. That value, there's a giant sucking sound. That value is magically transported from one symbol into another, right?
I don't understand why they're doing it then. Like, what's the value for the U.S., for the Federal Reserve?
Well, it's hard to say what interests are at stake and why they're doing it. It's obvious they're doing something crazy. I mean, it's unprecedented what they're doing. Actually, there are precedents, but never on this scale. Individual countries have done this when they're in trouble, but this is the entire planet. I talk a lot about the U.S., but the world pays its bills in dollars. So we're really talking about the world here. And why are they doing this? Well, for one thing, the U.S. has an $18 trillion debt denominated in dollars. So the more they devalue the dollar, the less real money that debt represents. So that's one reason. If you create inflation, it's like an invisible tax. So you think that you've got $100 in the bank, but that $100 only buys $80 worth of groceries when you go to spend it. That means that you've been taxed, but you didn't really realize it because you're like, oh, there's still $100 in there. That's one possibility. There's another possibility where there could be transnational and apolitical interested groups that want to see a new system of money. Right? There are. Well, I mean, I don't know exactly how you refer to them, and even if they're even coordinated or not. But even corporations these days are transnational. Their interests expand beyond political borders. And Apple will go set up in Ireland so they can pay less U.S. taxes, for example. And we've got these things like the Pacific Trade Partnership, the TPP, and another one for Europe. And these are supranational corporate agreements that who knows what their interests are, but their interests supersede political boundaries. And there could be people in power that really don't care that there's an imaginary line that goes around the United States. Especially when it comes to money, if they could profit from counting money in a different way, maybe that's what they want to do. I mean, some people even say that Bitcoin is like some sort of plot or plan to move away from the dollar or traditional fiat currencies. There's another fiat currency that's run by the World Bank called the SDR, or the special drawing rights, and the World Bank still has a clean balance sheet and could act as the lender of last resort if the next economic crisis involves a reset from the dollar. So, I mean, it's undeniable. I don't know. I'm just a little small fry. I mean, I can only go by what, my finger on the pulse. But this is, I mean, even a 12-year-old kid could tell you, like, there's something like, this is 30 years, 40 years. There's something weird about this. Let's go back to the actual. There's something strange happened here. If you're looking at it over time, like, man, what happened there? It's like an earthquake. And we don't know what the unintended consequences are going to be.
What happened during the second huge spike there?
This was like
the crisis. And then
this is the crisis, and then
12 or 13.
This is various rounds of what they call quantitative easing. Maybe you've heard the term quantitative easing. It's a euphemism for money printing. And they printed a bunch of money, and all the economy didn't recover. They printed a bunch more money. This is QE2, and looks like we need some more heroin. Let's take another hit. And now they've said that they're not going to print any more money, and they've also said that they're going to raise interest rates. So they're trying to get off the heroin habit. Here's the effective funds rate. This is the interest rate. This is the other lever of control that the Federal Reserve has. It's basically the money that they lend overnight to banks at what rate, and they can control the rate because they print the money, so it doesn't matter. They pull it out of a hat. But you can see it's like zero. This is it since 2008. Like, patient is dead. This like flat line, right? We're going into negative territory, there's the they're hanging on her every word. Like they're thinking about changing this word patient from the guidance, and the markets like tremble, and like all these people write about the one word change, and she's like some sort of sage, like she's some sort of shaman who has like some sort of like magical control over the world's economy by taking the word patient out of her press release. I mean, it's really just insanity, if you ask me. It's really just crazy. Here's the latest news where they're saying, even though we said we weren't going to be patient, the timing of the Federal Reserve's interest rate hike, which would be the first in nearly a decade, is unclear for now because policymakers must watch the U.S. economy, right? So they're trying to keep the U.S. economy from. But it just doesn't seem right that one gray-haired lady like talks about something, and the whole U.S. economy, the mighty world economy, like could shit the bed. I mean, it just doesn't. If it's that precarious, then it's not real, in my opinion. So let's bring it home. All of that in comparison to Bitcoin. The reason they're hanging on every word of the Federal Reserve Chairman is because people are trying to make decisions about the future, right? How much is it going to cost me to borrow money next year? Do I want to build that factory or not? Do I want to hire those extra workers or not? They're trying to make business decisions, right? And because these people have such a control over the price of everything, really, they can't make those decisions until somebody has a press conference, right? And it's just not good for business. This is another reason why Bitcoin and currencies like it were created. This is the money supply and inflation rate of Bitcoin. So you can see that because it's math, it's an algorithm. It's done by consensus. There's tens of thousands of computers all over the world that agree how this works. Nobody can print money, and nobody can change the inflation rate. It's at a predictable rate all the way to the year, way out here. Basically, into the next century, Bitcoins will be being created, and next year we'll know exactly how many are created. You remember I clicked on that link. At any moment in time, we know exactly how many Bitcoins there are. Now it's this many, right? So that's why we predict into the future. And if you're, I talked to these guys in Komodo, the dive shop, about Bitcoin, and the guy was really smart, and he said, it's just so volatile. I just don't know if I can use it because it's so volatile, and it is volatile in terms of price versus the US dollar, but it's not volatile at all in terms of inflation and money supply. And just like Wall Street said, the volatility of Bitcoin will go down over time as more and more people use it. I can foresee a day when it's like the perfect currency, where dive shops will be saying the price is in Bitcoin, and whatever other currency you have, you've got to convert to that, because tomorrow we will know exactly how many Bitcoins there are in existence. And with other currencies, we won't. But we'll see what happens. That's all I've got. Any questions from the gallery? Okay, let's wrap it up.
One of the first introductions I had to Bitcoin was with a couple guys that were big into cryptocurrencies, and one of the main topics of conversation was that they're saying Bitcoin would eventually be overtaken by some other cryptocurrency as like the big one. So I'm just curious, because they were basically saying that right now it's too much electricity. It costs more in electricity to mine a Bitcoin than it's worth. So I'm curious as to what your feeling on that is.
Yeah, I think that's, well, first of all, there's like a million other cryptocurrencies, and it's like this magical cauldron of creativity where we're trying to see, like, is there something better than Bitcoin? If so, let's move to it. And that's possible. I mean, Bitcoin is just an idea, really. If something were to supplant Bitcoin, we could still have all these same discussions, because it's, Bitcoin and the idea of Bitcoin is an answer to all this craziness. And maybe someone will come up with a better system that uses less electricity, or is more efficient, or faster transaction speed, or more throughput, or who knows what. And it's for that reason that I don't have all my money in Bitcoin. Bitcoin could fail technically, or something way better could come along, and we just don't know. We're like in the Wild West here. Like it's up for grabs. But I do think, as far as the electricity goes, yes, there's a lot of computers using a lot of electricity. But just to give you an idea, it's still only about 6 cents to do a transaction of any amount, right? Why is it so low compared to a bank transfer or Western Union or what have you? It's because those other organizations have all of the overhead that support those transfers. So all of the banks and all of the electricity in those banks and all the people in those banks and the cars they drive to and from the banks, that's a lot of energy as well. And it's a lot more energy than Bitcoin and all the computers that are just humming away in the background. So if you're going to talk about electricity, you need to compare it to the vast systems that it replaces. And it's way more efficient than the current banking system. I mean, the reason that 5 billion people on the planet don't have a bank account is because the banking model is not scalable, right? It's only scalable if you've got computers automating the process of trust. And maybe something will come along that's even better than Bitcoin, but for now, it's pretty good.
5 billion people don't have bank accounts. That's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I just heard a very interesting thing, that in the States, there's an increasing discouragement of using cash.
Yes.
So they're really not wanting a bank deposit. My friend tried to make a cash deposit to someone else's account, and the bank refused the cash deposit.
Well, there was a story recently that Jokowi wants to increase tax revenue by 30%. And without creating any new laws or any, but just through enforcement. And how does he do that? By weaning the Indonesian population off of cash. He wants them to be using bank accounts, wants them to be using credit cards. And yeah, there's some people would say there's a war on cash.
Didn't someone post an article in the group about that? I saw some article about like France and some other European countries that were like putting what would you call it? Capital
controls?
Capital controls.
The thing is,
That wasn't in the group.
if you rely on electricity to maintain your banking system, you have a power outage and nobody knows where anybody's money is. This is not cool. It's a little too precarious.
So are you saying that that's a knock on Bitcoin or on virtual currencies?
It's a knock just in general on we have to have something that we can have in the physical space. Like we can always print out our Bitcoin and put that in a vault, right? We still have that capacity.
Yes.
We will need electricity to redeem it and exchange it. But yeah, I mean, it's still precarious if the whole thing is digital.
But it is already, there's like how many percentage you have in cash on the whole world right now.
Yeah,
Doesn't matter if it's dollar, rupee, or whatever.
But like we said, how many people don't have bank accounts and are operating cash?
They have no money. Those are mostly poor people.
Yes.
They have
Indeed.
nothing.
And actually, it's only then 5 billion, you said? How many people do not have?
5 billion people don't have bank accounts?
Compared to the whole world, which has them?
So
7 billion.
So there's 2 billion people in the world who have money, right?
Yeah, who participate in the modern interconnected financial system.
Exactly.
Right? They can invest their money in stocks, can transfer money worldwide, can get a loan.
Yes.
And yeah, there's if we're going to service billions of people more, then we've got to do so in a more automated fashion, in a trustless way, is Bitcoin's suggestion.
And only one thing which is then also to think about, because the people are poor, yeah, it's like those people which have the bank accounts have the most of money. So this is why I say most of the money is already digitally.
No, it is. And I'm just saying we're very
Bitcoins.
vulnerable.
Very already.
Extremely vulnerable.
This is why I find it so
There was a
interesting.
massive solar flare. What would happen? To Bitcoin and everything.
But we are already. We saw with Greece that people did not get something from the ATM. Their grandmothers all saved all their money, and then it got ripped off by the banks. Like it just happened, yeah. And this was, yeah.
Yeah.
It's just very interesting.
Yeah. Well, I keep going back, and it's funny. It sounds. I didn't really understand the gravity of this statement, but money is not real.
No.
And if the power goes out, you realize in a hurry. You've got a stack of bills, or someone's got a rice. The stack of bills don't mean anything, and the rice means everything.
That's why those wheelbarrows of money that got burned
In the Weimar Republic,
World
World War I Germany.
Yes, that's it's happened many times.
Yeah.
So
Well, there was Gilligan's Island too.
what?
Gilligan's Island. Remember the Thurston Howell? He was the rich guy,
Yeah.
but his money didn't mean anything when he.
Didn't mean anything.
No.
Coconuts were much.
Yes, coconuts.
Coconuts still are very.
But anyway, I think it's practical to think philosophically about money, especially today, and that was the point of
So I think
today's.
we are really where there's a great cool intersection happening is in the open source movement toward alternative energy and self-generation of power. All that stuff has been open sourced, and a lot of people around the world making motors and generators that can keep the power alive. So if we distribute the power generation the same way we're distributing Bitcoin.
Right. And also
And-
food needs to be decentralized as well. Food sources. It's the
Cuba's already shown us how to do that. They have had the most, if you haven't seen the videos on what happened in Cuba, Cuba is completely food secure. And that came out of their poverty.
yeah.
And it flipped completely to where if you wanted to become wealthy, you became a gourmet farmer in the city. And
Yeah.
people, and you know,
That's so cool.
it turned the whole thing around. So the economy is technically still poor, but everybody has brilliant food.
Right. Well, and then
which means they're healthy.
right, then you start to think about, you know, the
What's
concept
wealth?
of, yeah, what the concept of
What
wealth
is
and what is
wealth?
it really?
Yes.
Yeah.
So everywhere we see food security, we see actual prosperity, which they don't want us to know about. That's why we have this kind of, you know, factory farming, centralized, you know, depend on the grocery store nonsense, which if we all started growing and sharing, would go away. So yeah, we're in a really interesting time.
Yes, yes. Isn't it fun to be alive? Well, let's leave it there. Thanks for coming tonight. Just as a reminder, we've got our Bitcoins in Bali Facebook group. If you find something interesting, post it there. We've got our conversation going on Twitter, hashtag Bitcoins in Bali. And if you want to get involved with trying to make things happen here locally, I'm trying to work with local businesses, local merchants, also putting on a Bitcoin 101 class here at Ubud. If you want to help, I don't have a date yet. And I know you want to do one in Bahasa, Indonesia. All of that is in the works. So let me know if you want to help out with that. And otherwise, we'll see you online and right back here next week at 6 o'clock. Thanks for coming, guys.
Oh, we didn't talk about the wallets.